Okay, ladies, welcome. My name is Vanessa Ortali, and this presentation is being brought to you by the ladies community. So we do a ton of weekly online workshops with different experts, influencers, celebrities, just to give you a ton of information to improve your personal and professional life. So today we're bringing to you Megan on behalf of Adele Wellness, and she's going to be talking about cognitive behavioral therapy and how to make sure you keep on track with your goals and don't fall off the bandwagon. So take it away, Megan, and tell us all the stuff we need to know.
Okay, thanks, Vanessa. So I'm going to talk about a framework that we use within Adele Wellness, and it covers nutrition, cognitive behavioral therapy, and mindfulness practices to be able to take control of your state and keep ready, basically, for the goals, the big goals that you want to achieve. So I work with this wonderful woman named Adele. I think you and Adele have done a little bit of work together in the past, so that's great. This is a little bit about me, and I've been working as a nutritionist now for a couple of years, a cognitive behavioral therapy coach for that same amount of time. I'm recently certified as a yoga instructor, so bringing some more mindfulness and breathwork techniques to you as we go. And I'm a beach volleyball athlete for Canada as well, so I use this within my daily life, but also quite a bit within sport. So the things that I wanted to talk about with you ladies today is I'm going to give you a quick intro into CBT. We'll talk a bit about core values and micro shifting. I'll talk about blood sugar balance and why it's so important for energy and for reducing your cravings. And we'll talk a bit about mindfulness and resilience. And then typically the Tevlin method, this program that Adele and I created, is 12 weeks long, but we've been playing around with turning it into a group format. So similar to this, the calls would be in a group setting, and we've broken it down into 4 weeks just throughout COVID to make it more accessible for people. So I'll share a bit about that at the end. So I'm just going to move your faces here. Within cognitive behavioral therapy, I really love this modality because it is a therapeutic modality that gives you problem-solving techniques and strategies. A lot of other therapeutic modalities like psychotherapy look to your past, and it's really important to be able to look into our past and understand why we do what we do. But the thing I love about CBT is that it gives you tools that you can use moving forward, because sometimes we don't want to have to go back into our childhood and look at all the reasons why we're acting the way we're acting. Sometimes we just want to know how to change it in the moment. And so CBT helps us to close what we call the knowing doing gap, because a lot of us understand from a certain level what we should be doing, but we're still not doing it. And we see this a lot when it comes to nutrition programs, for example, or like people that are trying to lose weight. Like, obviously, you know that you're not supposed to be eating chips, but it's still happening. And so these are the things that we can start to look at reasons why and start to kind of shift the knowing doing gap a little bit through something called micro shifting. And so, like it says here, when we understand what someone is thinking, we can understand our behaviors, because what cognitive behavioral therapy says is that our behaviors are always a result of our beliefs and our thoughts. So two people could be in the exact same scenario and react in completely different ways because of the thought patterns that are happening. So we often think that we're victims to our circumstances or our surroundings, but we know that our thoughts about our situations ultimately contribute to our emotions and our behaviors about those thoughts. So the situation is merely a trigger, and this helps us to understand that we can have an internal locus of control. So it's really important for resilience factors to have an internal locus of control, especially during more stressful times like the one that we're in right now, because if we always are viewing our lives as an external locus of control, or like life is happening to us, then we have a really hard time being able to even consider things like this, or consider pattern interrupts that we could potentially use, unless we believe inherently at some level that we do have an internal locus of control. So the situation is a trigger, which leads to an automatic thought, or what is sometimes called a permission thought. And so situations that I deal with often are around permission thoughts like, I've had a really tough day at work, I deserve this glass of wine, or I deserve this cookie, or what have you. It's you know, the things that are comfort foods or alcohol, the things that make us feel good. And these are the permission thoughts that often happen from a stressful day or situations like a pandemic. So that's something that I've been seeing a lot more of with my clients, or I've been hearing that they're struggling with is, more drinking, more snacking, less movement, obviously less motivation to go to the gym and incorporate routines like that when our routines have been interrupted. And so this starts what's called a vicious cycle. And we get caught in vicious cycles, and it's the negative spirals that we hear of. But just like you can get into a negative spiral, you can also shift that and get into a positive spiral. The same thing can also be true. And so the vicious cycle can be interrupted by creating a more balanced thought, or what's called a pattern interrupt, through cognitive behavioral therapy. And so if we can create a more balanced thought by essentially creating a small bit of evidence, or understanding that there is a small bit of evidence on the other side of our beliefs that are so ingrained and that we think are so true, then we can start to have these really small shifts in mindset and in behavior that will eventually change the entire trajectory of the way that we think and where our lives are headed. So that's the idea of CBT and how we can start to use this modality. I sent Vanessa over a couple of worksheets that I think she's going to send you guys over after this is over. So I'll share my screen with the worksheet as well. But the idea here is that the 4-factor model worksheet is what we can start to use when you're by yourself, or when you're working with a coach. Sometimes it's hard to see the evidence on the other side of your beliefs, and so you might need to enlist help from friends or family members. But the 4-factor model is this sheet right here. Oh, can you still see my screen? Resume share.
So we still see the 4-factor model. So unshare it, and then you have to share the new screen.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Stop share. Share this one.
Perfect. We see it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. So this is the 4-factor model, and let's use drinking more as an example, just because that's one that I've been speaking about recently with clients. And so that would be the situation that would be triggering for you, would be drinking more. The automatic thought that could potentially come out of that scenario would be, well, I'm sure everyone else is as well. Like, we're all in isolation. I'm sure this is something that's happening to a lot of people. Or another one of the I deserve thoughts, like, I deserve this drink, like isolation has been really hard, or I miss my friends, I deserve this drink, things like that. So when we start to work our way through this model, we begin to ask ourselves, okay, what's happening to me emotionally when I have this automatic thought? So oftentimes these thoughts are anxiety provoking or stressful in nature. And so those are the emotions that we most often see come up, would be disappointment in ourselves, or feelings of failure, deep sadness that comes from recognizing what your automatic thought is, if you're not just like kind of numbing and going through the motions. So once we recognize what's happening to us emotionally, the next step is to ask what's happening in your body. So typically it would be butterflies in your stomach, or a tightness in your chest. Maybe there's some tears happening, maybe there's an increased heart rate, sweating, things like that are things that could happen when a situation is triggering to you. And any one of these things could be the first thing that you notice. So you might start with the physiological and understanding that, okay, I'm feeling like I'm starting to sweat for no reason, or I'm feeling a tightness in my chest, like, what is happening? And you go back through your emotions and through the automatic thought. So it doesn't need to happen in this specific order, but you want to make sure that you check all these boxes in terms of recognizing what's happening in each area. So as far as the resulting behavior, when you recognize that you're triggered and what your automatic thought is, what's happening to you emotionally and what's happening in your body. So maybe after drinking more and recognizing that this is happening to you, that leads to eating more, either in the moment or the next day, or it could lead to sleeping less, both of which can start up a vicious cycle. If you sleep less, you wake up the next day, You could eat more because you have more cravings, because sleep controls that. It contributes to what's called negative self-efficacy. So self-efficacy is the idea that the more often we show up for ourselves, the more we'll believe that we can accomplish a certain thing. And so the same thing can also be true for the flip side of that, in that the less often you show up for yourself, the more you believe that you're not worthy of it and that you won't show up for yourself in the future. And so if you've been consistently drinking more throughout quarantine, it's first really important to recognize that you're not alone. These scenarios happen to everyone. If it's happening even on a small scale to you or someone that you know, it's definitely happening on a larger scale somewhere else as well. And it's okay to talk about these. And so when we get to the behavior and we recognize that we're in a vicious cycle, that's when it's time to start to create a different automatic thought, or a more balanced thought. Because the automatic thought where it says the second piece, the second automatic thought, after you've eaten more or gotten into some sort of vicious cycle that you don't want to be in, the second automatic thought could look something like, see, I have no willpower, I can't do this. Or this is too hard, I'm a failure, I can't handle this. These are the types of deeper automatic thoughts that come from when we get into cycles of negative patterns. And so we need to create evidence, both for and against, because your experience is valid and there is evidence for the thoughts that you're having. And so in this scenario, the evidence for your automatic thought could be that we don't have any normal stress management techniques to deal with this at this time, because it's a situation that none of us have dealt with before. And so maybe drinking is the right way to deal with it right now. So that could be some evidence for the way that you're feeling or the way that you're thinking. You don't have the stress management techniques from before, which could have been the gym, things like that. Like all the things that you used to use were taken away from you. You just might not have the tools in your toolbox. Or you are talking with all your friends and everyone is actually drinking more. So these are pieces of evidence for the way that you're feeling and thinking to, make it seem like, okay, I'm not crazy. Like this is actually a valid experience that I'm having. The evidence against is always tougher to come up with. And so this is where we might have to, get a friend or a family member to help us out. But this could be things like where we need to look to past experiences to create some evidence against. So it could be, I've had success in other areas of my life when I've drank less in the past, or when I've eaten less in the past, or whatever the situation is that you're dealing with in the moment. Other evidence against could be that you've never needed it before, even though you feel like you need it now. There are other things that I could be doing right now, such as like other self-care things, other stress management techniques that I could be using. I have stopped drinking in the past and I can do it again. Like there's a lot of evidence that we can come up with on the other side. And even if you only come up with one piece of evidence, that's all you really need to be able to start to shift your thinking a bit, because this whole exercise is just supposed to take us out of the all or nothing way of thinking that a lot of us often are in. So balanced thoughts, like I was saying before, are primarily even though statements. And so it would be something along the lines of, even though I feel like I'm failing, I just need to practice showing up for myself. Or even though I feel like I'm failing or I'm drinking more, I just need to set my environment up for success. Like it needs to be something that can spin you around really quickly and could potentially come to mind as quickly as your automatic thoughts would. So does anyone have, I hope that was clear, does anyone have any questions about the way that you would use this worksheet and how the 4-factor model would look in your own life? Or if there's anyone dealing with a specific situation, we can go through one of yours as well.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
I totally missed the first automatic thought. So I got the second one, what you said for like drinking more situation. So first automatic thought, what was it? You said, I'm sorry.
The first automatic thought would be something along the lines of, I deserve this, quarantine is really hard, or I'm sure everyone is doing it, like it's no big deal, something along those lines. And then the second automatic thought is usually like the deeper rooted one of like, see, I can't do this, I'm a failure.
Yeah. I see. Thank you.
No problem. Does anyone have a situation that they want to work through? No worries if you don't want to share in a group setting. I totally understand that as well. We can carry on.
So at the moment, I'm afraid of losing my friend, and it's making me anxious. And I feel like I care about this friendship more than she does, because I text a lot more and she doesn't respond that often. Maybe after 3 texts in a row she'll respond, but she can wait days and even like a month to respond.
Okay, so let's work through it. So the situation is that she's not corresponding the same way that you are. She's not showing the same level of friendship, you feel like. And so what's the thought that you're having around that?
I'm afraid of like losing the friendship, and I'm afraid that she doesn't care as much as I do about it.
Okay. And what happens to you emotionally when you have that thought?
Emotionally, I just get really anxious and start overthinking it and overanalyzing and asking questions in my head, like, did I say the right thing? Did I do the wrong thing? And start kind of having a panic attack a lot.
Okay. And so is that what also happens in your body then? Like the panic attack type symptoms? You also notice like the chest tightness and things?
I get a lot of anxiety in my stomach mostly.
Okay.
Yeah, and just all this energy.
Okay. And what's the resulting behavior? Do you text her more, or do you shy away a bit? How do you respond?
I usually shy away a bit and maybe think about what I'm going to say, like maybe later. Or I just kind of overthink the situation and think, well, should I respond now? Or should I respond later? Or should I like say something now? Or should I say how I'm feeling?
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so if you can think of evidence for the thought that you might lose this friendship, what is the hard evidence that that she no longer wants to be in this friendship with you? Is there any evidence like that?
The evidence would be like saying, well, she said no twice in a row to like calling on FaceTime, and because it's kind of like a long distance friendship, so it's a little hard. But she doesn't respond to my text right away. That's probably the evidence that I would.
Okay. Is there any evidence that you can come up with against that? Like when she does respond, is she still using the same tone? Like, are you guys still having conversations that are meaningful?
Yeah, we're still having good conversations, and we're still like talking quite a bit and having like a good time.
Okay, perfect. So can you start to see that because maybe she's just not answering right away, could be other factors in her life, like maybe she doesn't have her phone on her, maybe she had other obligations or things to do when you asked to FaceTime, things of that nature, instead of it being related to your friendship at its core? Because like you said, you've come up with a little bit of evidence on the other side in that you're still having conversations that are good, you still talk once in a while, she still responds, even though it's not right away or maybe at the same rate. So is there a more balanced thought that you can come up with around the situation that could be something that could come to mind when you start to get worked up about it?
Like a reassuring thought, like
like an even though statement, like even though my friend isn't responding right now, she's always responded in the past.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Or even though she hasn't responded yet, I'm sure she will by tomorrow, like something like that can calm you down in the moment, help you to see that it's definitely not black and white, and that there is another side to the story, and that there is a small shift that you can make in your thinking that'll help you kind of get back into the here and now, and also helps you to be a better friend in that scenario, right? So does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I'm going to stop the sharing of this one again, go back to my slides.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing, Brittany. I think a lot of people can relate to their friendship shifting, especially during quarantine.
Yeah, totally. That's been really big in my life too, actually, because so many of my friendships were, so many of everyone's friendships are face-to-face friendships. It's been interesting to shift, business-wise, friendships, all sorts of relationships to virtual, so I definitely see where you're coming from on that. Okay, so Socratic questioning is a method that you can start to use. It's a practice of self-questioning, essentially, that can start to challenge absolute ways of thinking. It helps to bring us from a reactionary state and from the back part of the brain, which is primal, into the prefrontal cortex, which is for problem solving. And so when we can start to lift up out of our experiences in a way and start to view our situations or our lives as if we're watching a movie, when we start to feel ourselves getting emotional or reactional, then we can bring ourselves back into problem solving. We can kind of take the emotion out of it if it's negative emotions that are happening, and start to think it through a little bit more. So Socratic question examples are things like, what makes me think that this thought is true? Or what is the nature of this thought? Or how valid is this thought for me right now? Or what's another way to look at the situation? These are ways that you're challenging yourself to have to answer it, which is, this last question is a good example of what's called cognitive reframing. So it's essentially training yourself to be able to see the silver lining in things, be able to see the other side of negative situations that have happened. So something that you can do just as like a thought exercise or a journal exercise could be looking at a scenario that's happened to you within the last 24 hours and trying to see another way to look at it. It doesn't need to be the positive side of the situation, but just any other way that you can see this thing that you viewed as negative is a way that you can start to train yourself over time, and that'll snap to mind more quickly 3 months down the road. If you practice this on a regular basis, you won't just see the negative right in front of you. You'll be able to see kind of a spectrum of the situation at hand. So Socratic questioning is a really great tool, one that I love because it's easy to remember. Like sometimes it's hard to think like, okay, I'll pull out my 4-factor model worksheet and work through this situation that's really hard for me right now. Whereas Socratic questioning, you can kind of use it in the moment and on the spot. So I love Socratic questioning. The next thing that I wanted to chat, The next thing I wanted to chat about was core values. And this is what we call the wheel of life. And there are essentially 6 different categories that we've named within our value system. And it's been said within psychology that you can only really operate from your top 3 core values at any given time. Even though this might be shifting on a month by month or week by week basis, if you can get a handle on where you're operating from right now, it helps you to understand maybe where some frustrations are coming from, or it helps you to set up your day in such a way that you can feel like you've been successful. So an example that I like to use is within my own life. So health and well-being and family and friends are 2 of my top 3 most of the time. And so that means that when I wake up in the morning, I'm going to try and get a workout in and call a friend or a family member both before noon. And that means even if, work explodes for the afternoon or something goes off the rails, my day still sort of feels like a success because I checked off 2 of my 3 core values in the first half of the day. So once you understand where you're operating from and what's important to you, you can start to create boundaries around that and protect that time a little bit more if that's where you know that you'd like to focus right now. And so I think that understanding your value system is really important in terms of decision making, and also in using these CBT exercises to begin to understand why certain situations are maybe triggering you more than others are, because it could be in the realm of, someone took away time that was meant for your health and well-being instead of, and you would have reacted totally differently if someone, interrupted time or booked a meeting or something like that was cutting into social and cultural, for example, which is maybe not as important to you right now. So understanding your values is essential in terms of decision making of any kind, but also reactions. I have a worksheet on that I can send your way too, actually. Okay, so micro-shifting, consistency is everything. Like we aren't our values, even though we'd like to say that we are what we do on a regular basis. So we can be operating not in line with our values, but we are actually what we are doing on a daily basis. And so consistency is so important in terms of the way that we talk to ourselves, what we do, who we interact with, and micro shifting is a way that we can start to make really small changes in behavior that will, if you make a change that's like this big, it doesn't look like anything's happening right now, but if you pan that out into the rest of your life, you'll be a completely different person in 2 years from now than you are right now, just from the smallest little thing or the seemingly small things that you're changing and adjusting on a daily basis. And so this is the next sheet that I wanted to send over to you guys. So stopping the share once more. Share. So this is called actual versus ideal. And I am a big, big believer in writing things down and writing down your big goals. And so when you're writing out this sheet, write down your actual self first. And that means, the objective types of things, like I am a 30-year-old woman that's this and this and this, and write down who you are in this moment. It doesn't need to have any emotion tied to it. Your ideal self, on the other hand, you want to use adjectives and words that make you feel good and uplifted. Your ideal self is what you want to move towards, and what we're going to try and bridge the gap between your actual self and your ideal self using microshifting. So your microshift card are the small daily actions that'll help take you from your actual self right now to your ideal self that you'd like to be in a year from now, let's say. And so this could be really small shifts, or they could be in different areas of life, for example. So usually when I'm working with clients, we're working on nutrition-based things for a lot of it. And so one of the micro shifts could be something simple like having 2 more glasses of water per day, or something along those lines, so that, it's somewhere that you can see it often. You would put your microshift card, on your bedside table or your fridge, and it's one of those consistency type things where you get to check it off each day and feel good about it and recognize that you're building momentum because you're continuing to show up for yourself and building that self-efficacy over time. And a big reason that I think that writing down your goals, or in this case, writing down your ideal self, are so important is because then your subconscious mind in a way kind of takes over, and you begin to make these small decisions that you're not even really aware of. They all start to lead in the direction of your ideal self. So this is true in sport, in life, in weight loss, in behavior change of all kind. The more you're able to remind yourself of that goal, even if it's just because you wrote it down and you get to revisit it once a week, or you journal about it once a week, that's the more likely it is that you're going to continue making these small decisions that lead you there. So does anyone have any questions about micro-shifting, or need help creating maybe a micro-shift within their own life, or have any questions about actual versus ideal?
Megan, can you give an example of the microshift cards where it says here on the page, small daily actions to reach your ideal self?
So a micro shift that I'm using in my life right now would be screen time. So I know that it's important to get off your screen earlier in the night for circadian rhythm and to get into a regular sleep cycle. And so a micro shift that is on my card right now is screens off by 9 p.m. Another one is meditate 5 minutes a day. I started that goal with 2 minutes. It has to be something that feels really achievable to you. Like, of course I can meditate for 2 minutes. Like, I can do anything for 2 minutes. That's the way that it should feel. So you don't want to go from, okay, I don't work out at all, to I'm going to work out 7 days a week down on my microshift card, because that's not realistic. It's not going to lead you to success. It's going to make you feel like a failure, which is the opposite of what we want this card to do for you. And so the small daily actions really need to be small, like smaller than you think. So an extra glass of water, 2 minutes of meditation, screens off by 9, things like that are things that are quite often on my personal micro shifting card. that help, Christina?
Yes, thank you.
My pleasure. Okay, so back to the slides. I want to shift gears a bit and talk about blood sugar balance, because blood sugar balancing is super important for maintaining your energy levels, making sure that you aren't having crazy cravings throughout the day. It helps to manage your weight, and helps to increase your productivity. And that's something that I've heard from a lot of people these days, is that like weight fluctuations are happening more frequently because our routines have been disrupted. We're at home all day, which means we're more likely to snack because there's, you know, some more boredom, or it's always there. Whereas, you know, at work, you know, your pantry beside you quite often. So there's less temptation. And so in this situation that we're in right now, there are a few different ways that we can start to balance blood sugar and take back control of that area of our life. And so macronutrient timing would be one of them. And this is something that I like to start people off with, is what's called a carb backloading protocol. And so that would mean you are staying away from carbs in the beginning portion of your day and having them with your dinner time meal. We're doing this because cortisol is highest at the beginning of the day. That's your stress hormone, the hormone that would wake you up if you didn't have an alarm set, for example. And when your cortisol is high, that means your insulin response is also more sensitive. And so if we're having carbs and sugary foods and things like that in the beginning portion of the day, we're getting a bigger insulin spike, meaning that we're also getting a subsequent crash. That's why, you know, 10 a.m. we need a coffee and a muffin, and then we spike back up, and then we crash, and then we spike, and we're on this roller coaster all day long of blood sugar irregularities. And so macronutrient timing is a way that we can start to balance that out a little bit. So we want to stick to either protein and healthy fats in the morning, or an intermittent fasting protocol if that's something that you've tried before and works for you. But breakfast would look something along the lines of like a couple eggs and a half an avocado instead of your regular toast and coffee, let's say. You can still have coffee. I'm not taking away anyone's coffee, but I will take away the toast just until the nighttime meal. And when you have carbs in the evening, it helps to release serotonin and melatonin in the brain. So it helps you to feel sleepy, which is when we want to feel sleepy. So if you've ever noticed that, you know, at lunch you have a carb heavy meal and you feel, that's when you get the 2 or 3 p.m. crash. That's the carbs that are doing that a lot of the time. So when we have our carbs at lunch, or at dinner, sorry, we are setting ourselves up to have a good sleep. And sleep is king. Sleep is queen when it comes to our hunger hormones for the next day, setting us up for success for any sort of energy management or weight management. And so we want to be able to prioritize sleep. And that's why we keep carbs in. I know that like keto diets or super carb restricting diets are really popular right now. But the number one complaint that I hear from people that have tried those is that their sleep suffers a lot. And when your sleep begins to suffer, nothing else really matters. You can't stick with a plan if you're not able to sleep. So macronutrient timing becomes important with blood sugar balance. So take your carbs away from the beginning portion of your day and stack them at the end, and notice what it does to your energy levels and your blood sugar. Another thing that you can apply would be adding in bitter foods, which start to help your liver to produce bile and start to aid in the detoxification process, kind of wakes up the digestive system for the day. And so apple cider vinegar is one that I really love. I'll add a spoonful of apple cider vinegar to sparkling water a couple times throughout the day. I would start with just 1 spoonful in a glass of water and then work your way up if you feel like you want more. But this is a really good food that will balance out your blood sugar regardless of if you've had a high carb meal. So that this could be something that you have after dinner, or you can start your day out with it if you want a little bit extra balance. And that would be one that I would suggest right off the bat. Even if you don't want to mess around with your macronutrient timing, you can always add apple cider vinegar into any portion of the day, and it'll be helpful in terms of balancing out your good and bad bacteria in your gut microbiome and setting you up for success with blood sugar. The last one is called cold thermogenesis. And this is a way to start to mobilize. There's 2 different types of fat cells in the body. And so there's brown adipose tissue and white adipose tissue. And white adipose tissue is our visceral fat, the fat around our organs that doesn't have any real role to play, and that can contribute to things like metabolic syndromes and these blood sugar irregularities and insulin resistance. And so brown adipose tissue is the good fat. That's the fat that we can use for metabolism. That's the fat that if we run out of glucose in our system, we can use brown adipose tissue as an alternate fuel source. And so cold thermogenesis is a way to mobilize the white adipose tissue, the white fat, and turn it into brown fat in the body. It's the quickest way to do so. You can do, there are alternate methods, like intermittent fasting does it a bit, so does sauna sessions or like heat therapy, but cold thermogenesis is the quickest way to do this, and really, really good for insulin stability and blood sugar balance throughout the day. There's been studies that show that people that do cold plunges in the morning have really balanced insulin and blood sugar regardless of what they eat, which is pretty incredible. But not all of us have a cold plunge pool. It's on my bucket list of things to get, but I would incorporate this into your day in the form of cold showers. Or if cold showers, you're just like, hell no, I'm not having a cold shower. After like 30 seconds, it's not that bad. But the back of the neck and around the spine, around the kidneys, these are places that all have the most brown adipose tissue receptors. And so even just working or watching TV with an ice pack on the back of your neck could have similar effects. But cold thermogenesis is something that I really love. It also has been said that people with depression have been subscribed this a little bit because it gives you the same sort of endorphin release as going for a long run. Serotonin is more readily released in the brain after you've had some sort of cold exposure. And so it could, if nothing else, help to boost your mood a little bit and help you to start the day feeling fresh, feeling happy. So these are 3 strategies that you can start to incorporate right away if you're feeling a little bit like over quarantine and like you're in a rut. These are things that can help to stabilize energy, help you feel a little bit better in your body as we move through. So stress reduction is in reference to some mindfulness techniques. It's the last of the 3 pillars that we deal with within this method. And this is mainly, I've used this primarily with people as it pertains to lowering cortisol before meals, but now it's an all the time thing because we're stuck in this stressed out state based on the state of the world and the collective anxiety that we're all kind of feeling right now. And so anything that we can do to get ourselves into a parasympathetic state is important because we're in a sympathetic state for most of our days right now. And so when we're in parasympathetic state, that is our rest and digest way of being. That is when we're going to get more out of the food that we're eating, when we're going to absorb more of the nutrients, when we're going to be able to digest better. So incorporating some kind of breath work before a meal is something that I love to get people to do because even with that one small change, you may notice a reduction in bloating or gas or some of these things that you think might be related to food, but may be entirely related with just the way that you're eating or the setting that you're in. So a lot of the times we're eating, well, before this happened, a lot of the time we were eating on the go or in front of our computers, or just some kind of like mindless state or way of being. And so this kind of helps us bring ourselves back into the here and now, helps us to focus, helps us to reduce our cortisol before having a meal, and which are all really important for digestion. So box breathing is one of my favorites. This is a technique where you inhale for 4 seconds, you hold at the top for 4, you exhale for 4, and you hold at the bottom for 4. And you can draw the box in your head as you're doing the breath work. You can do it twice, takes 32 seconds before a meal. It'll reduce your hunger hormones, reduce your cortisol, help you to feel grounded, help you to eat slower, which is important because a lot of the times we're missing out on the first part of digestion, which is mechanical digestion. So chewing, like we don't chew enough. We don't chew we don't chew as many times as we should. We don't chew as slowly as we should. And so this is something that can help to slow us down. Another stress reduction technique that I love is the 5 senses exercise, which is for awareness. So if you feel yourself getting into an emotional or reactionary state, bringing yourself back into your body by noticing something within each of the 5 senses. And then the last one is forest bathing, or getting out in nature of any kind. Helps us to connect back to what's important. I just read the book Forest Bathing. I thought it was so great. Just the idea that in Japan, it actually, like, medical professionals prescribe forest bathing as a way to reduce stress and to clear your head, get back into a normal way of being. Like, if you are getting particularly stressed out at work, you're allowed to leave and go forest bathing. I just love that. I think that it's so necessary and should be a part of every culture. And so forest bathing, if there's any sort of nature anywhere around you, being able to just get out for 5 or 10 minutes is essential during this time. And if you want to take it a little step further, grounding or earthing, if anyone's heard of that, is also very cool. There's being able to touch and connect to the earth helps to neutralize some of the free radical damage that we're all getting by being on screens more often right now. And so the earth can be incredibly healing if we just let it. And so getting out into nature, but then also just being able to touch that nature a little bit, like get your feet on the grass, touch a tree, like things that sound hippie-ish, but are also, there's some scientific backing to it as well. So these are things that I all love for stress reduction and are easy to incorporate. So resilience is the last thing that I want to chat about. And it is important during this time especially, but important for emotional well-being at any time. It's our buffer against depression. It increases our mental toughness. It helps us to be better in our relationships, helps us to show up better in all areas of life. And we know from the research that it's not a trait. It's not something that you are born with. It's a learned skill that you can start to build in right now. And so there's 6 factors to resilience. And so increasing your resilience can be done in any one of these 6, in all 6 at the same time. So these are some of the ways that you can start building it in right now. And so emotional intelligence, or being able to start to pay more attention to the way others are feeling, is a way that you can start to train your brain into greater emotional intelligence. But also self-efficacy builds into that as well, which is one in and of itself. But continuing to show up for yourself means that you'll be able to better show up for other people. Gratitude is a big one. We all know that gratitude exercises help us to get back into the moment, help us to see the silver lining in things. And so a gratitude exercise that I really love that also helps with this last point of social support and positive relationships would be to write out the first 5 or 10 people that come to mind in your support network that maybe you haven't reached out to in a while, and write them a card. Nobody gets mail anymore. Write them out a card, write them out a quick note that just says, who they are for you, what they mean to you. It'll help you to feel good, help you feel grounded and in gratitude, and helps to build that social support and helps to build your positive relationships, both of which help increase resilience. Cognitive reframing is one that we talked about a bit earlier. So that would be the exercise of trying to see a different way to view something negative that's happened to you within the last 24 hours. And again, that doesn't have to mean pulling a positive out of thin air if you really can't find one. It's just seeing some small different way to view the scenario. Optimism. Oh, there's an optimism exercise. I'll send this one along for you guys too, but it is, optimism is the ability to see things through rose-colored glasses, essentially, the ability to see that there could be a positive outcome on the other side of something. And an optimism exercise that I love to do it's called the 3 good things. And you, at the end of a day, write out 3 good things that happened to you that day. And then there's reflection questions that really make the exercise what it is, because a lot of the time, we have gratitude lists or optimism lists or things like that, and that's great. But the reflection piece is what helps us once again come into problem solving mode. So we're not just like, oh, that was a nice thing that happened, and we close our journal and we go to bed. Instead, some of the reflection questions are things like, why did this good thing happen to me? How can I create more of this good thing in the future? What does this good thing mean to me? All of these things help us to be like, okay, I'm going to how am I going to create more of this in the future? I'm going to do this, this, and this. It helps us get back into problem solving, helps us to understand that we have the internal locus of control, helps us to increase our resilience because we can see that there would be positive outcomes and things that we can do. So these are 6 factors. There's some exercises within each of them that you can work on at any point throughout the day if you feel yourself getting a bit wound up. And if you have any questions about any of these, let me know, because I think the next slide, next I'm going to go into just talk about the program a little bit that we've been running through. So if you have any questions about increasing resilience or anything in the other slides, please unmute yourself and let me know. Okay, we will move on. So the program where we incorporate CBT, nutrition, and mindfulness is usually 12 weeks. It's usually a one-on-one program. And we've taken it and made it into a 4-week group coaching program instead, because we wanted to be mindful of, people's situations right now in terms of, we want to be in a collective, we want to be with other people, and it's really difficult to do that at this time. And I just ran through the first 4 weeks with my first group, and they were really wonderful, and everyone is super open to sharing, and there's been some amazing connections that have come out of it. So I don't know, I couldn't be any happier with the way that it's been going, but also just I feel so different right now because there isn't that physical contact that we normally have. Like, everyone's really showing up for each other because of our not so unique situation, I suppose. But this 12-week program is usually $2,400 because we're, downtown on Bay Street. We usually work with CEOs and executives, people like that. But this is 3, but it's actually 4 masterclasses or 4 webinars like this for $197. And I can send that link out to Vanessa as well to send to anyone if they're interested. It's been a little bit of a challenge packing 12 weeks into 4 weeks, but it's been fun. And I promise that if you have any questions about anything, and if you don't want to talk about something in a group setting, I will be there for you throughout to chat privately as well, if you're interested in doing more of this work. So this is Adele, and these are some questions that you can ask yourself or maybe journal on tonight if you'd like a little bit of reflection. So where in your life are you out of alignment right now? Have you given up on a health or wellness goal, especially during times like this and in quarantine? And what is the cost of inaction, or what's a step that you can take right now? I really like the question, what's the cost of inaction? Because it's something that we don't often want to look at. Like, we don't feel like it's maybe worth it to take some of the smaller steps towards our health goals or our mindset goals or what have you at this time. But we don't often think about, okay, if I don't make a change, this is where I might be in a year or 2 years down the road, and I don't really like the looks of that. So asking yourself and just getting real with what the cost of inaction might be for you is an important piece of the puzzle as well. So these are the key takeaways that I wanted you to get. By changing the thought you have about a situation, you will actually change your behavior. So everything starts at the thought level, and being able to recognize that you are in reaction is the first step to being able to ask yourself a Socratic question or quickly run through the 4-factor model. There's other CBT techniques that we can dive into. If you have any questions, let me know. You can use microshifts daily to bridge the gap between your actual self and your ideal self. And your health is interconnected and wellness is multidisciplinary. So that's why I like these 3 pillars, basically whatever your goal might be. These 3 things play into everything. Even if your goal has nothing to do with nutrition, so you think, nutrition, in my view, is still such a big part of everything, because as they say, you are what you eat. The way that you're fueling yourself leads to the way you show up in your life as well. So this is how you can keep in touch with us and with me. And thank you all so much for spending an hour with me. It went by so fast.
I know, it always does. Thank you so much. I love how you do such a good job at giving technical and practical tools that people can use to actually implement this in their life. So you made it super easy to follow, and I really appreciate that. I love that in all of our workshops, I always tell the speakers, okay, make sure that you give like practical tips so people know what you're talking about and they can actually do something based on what you tell them. So thanks, that was awesome.
I'm very like, I'll believe it when I see it. Like that's the way that I've always kind of been. And so I really like practicality and things that I can use in my own life. So I'm glad that you feel that way too.
Yeah, that's so awesome. Ladies, do you have any questions before we finish up? I noticed, Christine, you just unmuted yourself.
I did. Oh, I just wanted to say thank you so much. I found this really helpful and I learned a lot. So I really appreciate it.
That's so
thank
good.
you.
That's great. Yeah. I love even how you ended it, Megan. It's so true. Like you can change your actions through your thoughts. And this was such a perfect example of that.
Yeah. And that's so much of the work you do too. So I appreciate the work that you do. I'm so glad that there's more people doing this out in the world. So thank you for having me on.
Right. So cool. Any other, we have some, Jennifer says, Jennifer, Kristen, and Brittany all say thank you. Dila says thank you. So yeah, if you have any other questions, reach out to Megan, and I'm sure she'll be happy to answer any questions you have about the program or anything else that she went over today. And if you have any specific questions, obviously Megan is super friendly and would be happy to help you. So just reach out. Yeah. Cool. Okay, awesome. Well, have a good evening, everyone. We'll chat with you soon. Bye.
Bye. Thanks very much.